Village of Dalton is more than $3.5 million in the hole. Mayor Tiffany Henyard is accused of misusing money, and today, she's nowhere to be found.
I've never seen any municipality have so many credit cards out there. Orders going out to each is mind-boggling.
When you don't answer questions, there's something to hide.
Despite Tiffany Henyard's outwardly carefree demeanor, the pressure on her was mounting. More and more individuals began to turn against her, and in a dramatic twist, one of Henyard's former trusted assistants came forward with startling revelations about her corruption and unethical activities. The expose uncovered a network of dubious behavior that shocked the community and made her already precarious situation even more dire. Henyard, who had once been a powerful figure at the helm of a political empire that seemed unstoppable, was now seeing it all unravel. Her downfall accelerated after a stunning accusation from Carmen Caro, one of Henyard's closest allies. Despite her public persona as a strong and capable leader, Caro, a board member in Fenn Township, publicly accused the mayor of using manipulative and predatory tactics to maintain power. Caro alleged that Henyard had been controlling residents, employees, and vendors, all while presenting a false image of success funded by taxpayer money. As the pressure on Henyard grew, she struggled to defend herself, trying to shift the blame elsewhere during public speeches. But her attempts only made her situation worse, as Caro explained why she had remained silent for so long about Henyard's financial mismanagement and extravagant spending. According to Caro, she had overlooked Henyard's troubling behavior until she could no longer ignore it, feeling compelled to speak out for those who had suffered under her leadership. Many were shocked by Caro's decision to speak out, given Henyard's influence over the township and her control over local law enforcement and public opinion. However, the criticism continued to mount despite Henyard's attempts to deflect responsibility. Caro revealed that Henyard had even tried to pressure her into lying about the origins of a foundation they were both involved in, further revealing the extent of Henyard's manipulative tactics. Henyard's problems only deepened as trustee Chris Gonzalez, who had been calling attention to her financial mismanagement for months, also grew increasingly vocal. Gonzalez had repeatedly requested financial records and answers to his mounting list of questions about Henyard's questionable spending. His demands were often ignored, which led to a tense board meeting dominated by discussions about Henyard's alleged financial misdeeds. The board was poised to propose new laws to combat corruption, including stricter budgetary regulations, credit tracking rules, and restrictions on using township property for personal gain. However, in an unexpected move, Gonzalez nominated Henyard for a key board position despite the mounting evidence of her corruption. This nomination, made just minutes before the midnight deadline, seemed both out of place and politically risky given the current climate. But it was later revealed that Henyard had applied for the position earlier in the year. The nomination served as a clear signal that Henyard's unchecked financial power was no longer going to be tolerated. Despite the political turmoil, Henyard was still appointed to the position by a narrow vote, but rather than quelling the opposition, the appointment only exposed the growing divisions within the township. The vote, which came at the last minute, emphasized the deep fractures in Henyard's once solid support base. As the full extent of Henyard's alleged corruption came to light, it became clear that her reign as mayor was nearing its end. Her power was eroding rapidly, and with each new revelation, it became harder for her to maintain control. Former allies like Caro and Gonzalez had turned on her, and their public accusations painted a picture of a leader who had lost touch with the very people she had once served. More and more individuals came forward with their own stories of manipulation, and the community remained on edge, waiting for the next shocking development in the unfolding scandal. Henyard's once thriving political career was now in freefall, and with each passing day, it became more apparent that she would soon face the consequences of her financial misconduct and unethical behavior. The drama surrounding her fall from grace was far from over, and the consequences of her actions were becoming inevitable.
The Norton Township Supervisor, how do you feel right now?
Oh man, I'm overjoyed. I see it coming. I love it. That means that I am fully blessed and everyone loves.
When the Board of Trustees nominated Tiffany Henyard for a key position, many residents of Dalton believed there was a hidden agenda at play. They suspected the trustees wanted to keep the decision out of the public eye to avoid the inevitable backlash that would follow if the process were open and transparent. The effects of trustee Chris Gonzalez's swift and controversial nomination of Henyard were felt throughout the village, further intensifying the already growing unrest surrounding the mayor's office. Naturally, the town's residents were furious. One particularly upset resident voiced their anger, saying, "I'm devastated that this woman came into our town and wasted all of our tax dollars. I had a suspicion that we had vulnerable residents suffering because of her corruption. Tiffany must be imprisoned and used as an example. She cannot continue to waste our money like this, even on basic necessities." The general sentiment in Dalton, shared by many, was that Henyard should be removed from office, as the community was already reeling from the alleged financial misconduct that had reached a boiling point. During a board meeting, Henyard tried to maintain control by pushing through an important agenda item and requesting backup invoices from the finance department, seemingly attempting to avoid scrutiny over her spending. However, Trustee Gonzalez wasn't easily swayed. In July, Henyard replaced a former employee, Keith Freeman, who had dared to reveal her questionable spending, with a loyal ally, Keith Price, without requesting board approval. This move was widely viewed as an attempt to tighten her grip on the town's finances by appointing someone she could trust. Gonzalez quickly pointed out that Price lacked the authority to manage sensitive financial data without proper authorization. Henyard tried to argue that Price's appointment didn't need board approval and claimed she had already received prior consent. As the meeting progressed, it became evident that Gonzalez wasn't going to let Henyard evade accountability. When she called for a vote on the invoices, hoping to squash the motion, she was met with resistance. In the end, Henyard lost the vote, marking a significant shift in the power dynamics. It was clear that her once loyal supporters were no longer willing to back her actions. Henyard was the only trustee to vote against the motion, while Gonzalez and former ally Caro voted in favor of obtaining the village's invoices. The residents eagerly awaited the outcome of this vote, hoping it would signal a turning point in their fight for accountability. But the struggle for control over Dalton was far from over. Henyard's efforts to regain control continued. She called a special meeting of the board to overturn new ordinances that had been enacted to curb her unchecked spending. The new rules, which required all expenses to be pre-approved, were a direct blow to her reckless spending habits. Henyard reacted angrily, claiming the new policies were preventing the township from providing vital services to children and senior citizens. "You think this is just about stopping Tiffany Henyard, but it's actually about stopping essential services here in Dalton," she argued. But despite her protests, it was clear that the board's goal was to ensure financial accountability and responsibility. These new regulations made it much harder for Henyard to spend freely, and the board also insisted that event budgets be approved before any funds could be used. Henyard's power to operate without oversight was rapidly dwindling, leaving her scrambling for permission to fund events, including a Friends of Tiffany Henyard picnic, ironically named after her own campaign fundraising committee. Even though her extravagant spending was under increasing scrutiny, Henyard refused to back down. She defended her actions, asking, "Do I not still provide for you?" But the board and the people of Dalton were no longer buying her rhetoric. The growing discontent, the new legislation, and the increased transparency surrounding her actions only emphasized how far her political career had fallen. The battle for control of Dalton was still unfolding, and it was unclear whether Henyard could weather the storm and maintain her position. The township was tense, and the future seemed uncertain as residents, once largely passive, began actively calling for change. The board members who had once supported Henyard were now turning against her, and her financial practices were placing her under mounting pressure. Her political empire, once seen as unstoppable, was crumbling, and it was evident that the people of Dalton were ready to fight for a future built on responsibility, integrity, and transparency. Henyard's situation became even more dire when a federal investigation revealed further corruption.
Indicted on federal bankruptcy fraud, and the lawyer tonight for Deputy Chief Louis Lacey tells me this is all part of prosecutor strategy to get.
Given the extent of his involvement in the misconduct, Lacey's defense strategy is losing credibility. It seems his legal team is trying to frame the case as part of a larger conspiracy aimed at bringing down Tiffany Henyard, claiming that federal authorities are only pursuing Lacey to build a case against her. However, the indictment against Lacey highlights his efforts to conceal his financial troubles. In 2019, he declared bankruptcy after a plaintiff sought to enforce a settlement agreement stating that Lacey owed $443,000 of a $555,000 payout. His financial maneuvering didn't stop there. He filed for bankruptcy again in 2020, reportedly to hide his income and avoid paying debts. Lacey is also charged with making false statements about his divorce and hiding bank accounts, further distorting the truth in an attempt to avoid scrutiny. With these federal offenses, it's clear the walls are closing in on both Lacey and Henyard, whose involvement in these schemes only deepens the scandal surrounding her leadership as Lacey faces up to 45 years in prison if convicted. Public frustration is growing. A 23-year-old resident from South Holland recently voiced her concerns about Henyard's administration, urging Dalton's officials to foster civic engagement through transparency and sincerity. The resident pointed out that Henyard's actions had undermined community trust. "You want us to attend meetings, but from what I've seen, the decisions being made are harming the citizens, not helping them," she said, referencing Henyard's opposition to a referendum on mental health funding that would have raised taxes. Another resident chimed in, expressing a lack of faith in Henyard. "We're not brainwashed. We do believe mental health is important, but we don't trust you to find a solution." Meanwhile, Henyard faces an increasing number of lawsuits. One of these involves Dalton Village trustee Andrew Holmes and was filed by a police officer who was part of Henyard's security detail. Another case involves accusations that Dalton officials unfairly denied a local barber a business license. The most shocking lawsuit comes from Dwayne Thrash, a former maintenance manager in Dalton, who claims that in 2023, some of his close friends approached him with a plan to replace the school board's attorney with a law firm of their choosing. When Thrash refused, things quickly spiraled out of control, and he was fired while on an unapproved leave of absence, with accusations of insubordination and poor performance. The lawsuit alleges multiple violations, including infringements on his First and 14th Amendment rights. As the state has yet to intervene in the growing number of accusations against Henyard, Dalton residents are demanding accountability. The situation is unraveling, and the pressure on Henyard to resign is mounting. One local resident summed up the frustration, saying, "None of this is normal, and the state of Illinois should be ashamed." It's becoming increasingly difficult to imagine how Henyard can hold on to her position much longer as the legal and public pressure intensifies. As the corruption story continues to develop, residents of Dalton remain on edge, wondering if their local officials can be trusted. Will Henyard's political career survive, or will the mounting legal pressure force her to step down? Only time will tell. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back with more updates soon. Stay tuned.